Neighbor tells you about the unstable man in the cul-de-sac who claims to have been abducted by aliens. And then there's the woman in town who claims to see Bigfoot all the time. Your boss, who you greatly admire, confides in you that he has started speaking with his wife daily when he gets home from work. She died 8 years ago. It's hard to believe this stuff, and you write these stories off as overactive imaginations. Are these people seeking attention, or are they a bit unstable? No matter what you think, if you're like me, you walk away wondering, what if that was true? The What If It's True podcast features stories by ordinary people like you and me. Something has happened to them, something so strange they are in agony unless they tell others. My name is Cameron Buckner, and the What If It's True podcast is available at whatifitstruepodcast.com and on all available podcast apps.
Welcome to Beast TV. What was that? You better get a fresh dip and buckle up. Welcome to Beast TV. This is our 105th episode, and we are thrilled that you're watching. We've got a fantastic guest tonight, and we want to welcome everyone that's in our chat, and we'll be taking questions at the end of the show. So we'll ask that you hold off on the questions until then and put them in all caps. Well, how has your day been, Larry?
Man, it's been pretty good. It's got a little more humid here in the Mid-South, but we've dodged it for a while, so it's about due, isn't it?
Yeah, it's due. And we got August around the corner.
Yep, definitely.
Well, Larry, I tell you what, let's go ahead and get this started, because we're going to learn so much tonight from our guest. And so I hope if you're watching this, you got a pen and paper ready.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
This is our guest tonight is definitely a mentor of ours, and we're just thrilled to have him on. So go ahead and introduce our guest, Larry.
I will. I know he's a lot smarter than us. How about that? That's
that ain't hard to do.
Oh, that's right. Tonight's guest, you may know him from Small Town Monsters or Beyond the Trail documentary series. He's a researcher and filmmaker, and he's not one of those that researches on the computer. This guy gets out there and gets with it. So our guest tonight is Aleks Petakov.
How you doing tonight, Alex?
Good. Awesome. Thanks for having me on, guys. How's it going?
Great.
Fantastic. Before we dive too deep into this tonight, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and how you made it to New England?
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a bit of a complicated story, as we were talking about before the show started. Long, complicated story. But I was actually born in South Africa. My parents had left the former Yugoslavia. Well, at that time, it was kind of falling apart in the 1990s. A lot of people might remember the Yugoslav war. So they went to South Africa. I was born there. Actually ended up leaving when I was just a few years old. So I really don't remember a lot from South Africa. We moved to the U.S. In the late 90s and been pretty much in the U.S. since then. Moved up to the New England area and have been kind of based out of New Hampshire really since the early 2000s, but have been kind of going all over the place since then. So I'm interested in filmmaking, as you mentioned, and also cryptid research. Definitely a fan of cryptozoology, always have been. So I kind of tried to merge my interests in cryptozoology with filmmaking, and just this wild journey has been unfolding for the past 5-6 years at this point.
What was it about the cryptids that got your curiosity up to start researching that?
Something about it. I was always curious. I remember when I was a kid, my dad told me the story of the Yeti. He gave me this figurine. I think I still have it in my collection, actually, as shadow box. And it came with this little scroll, like this fake ancient scroll that had the whole story of the Yeti in the Himalayas. Something about the setting and the story that I heard, I was like, there's something to this. So I started watching all the documentaries, reading all the books when I was a kid. And as I got older, it turned into armchair research. I remember back in, high school and that time period, all the blogs, that's when blogs were huge. So Lauren Coleman's blogs, CryptoZoo, Cryptomundo, a lot of the stuff online. And then, as life progresses, interests fade in and out. So I got a little bit out of it when I was in college. And when I started getting out of college, that's when Finding Bigfoot was on air. And I was like, oh man, this show's kind of interesting. It's rekindled my interest in the Bigfoot topic, because it's not the only cryptid I'm interested in. So I kind of re-examined it, and then I'm like, I like doing filmmaking. Why don't I just start doing some short films about cryptids? So that's really where that started, just kind of, I began going around and interviewing people, met some people in New England in the local area that have claimed to have had sightings. And I became really interested in it. I'm like, wow, I mean, there's more to this than just a curiosity factor. There could actually be something out there. And, when you speak to people that tell their stories very sincerely and don't change their stories and have a, consistency with other reports from across the country, you kind of wonder, what's going on here.
Right.
We find that it helps us whenever we go outside of our loop and go out with other researchers, and you get that different perspective and you learn things from them. And you just got back from the Olympic project. Are you able to tell us a little bit about going out with Shane Corson and them guys?
Yeah. So it's been this year's been crazy with the trips and everything. Actually, in April, we went out to the Olympic project, with the Olympic Peninsula, I should say, to hang out with the Olympic project. So that's the absolutely fantastic folks. As you mentioned, Shane Corson, become a good friend. Just what a solid guy. Everyone in that group is just amazing. Derek Randalls, Chris Spencer, just so many of the people we met along the way. Really solid researchers, great guys and gals. I mean, I couldn't speak more highly of them, actually. And they took us to the nest site, which is the area where they found these nests that they've been studying for about 5-6 years now, that they believe are Sasquatch created. So that was really interesting. We were actually the first people to ever sleep down in the area where the original nests were discovered, with Shane and some of the other group members. And then we spent some time at their property as well, that I believe Wally Hersom got for them some time ago, where there's been a lot of sightings in kind of the upper Olympic Peninsula area. That was crazy. I mean, the area, I'd never been out to Washington before. And as somebody into Bigfoot, it's like one of those rites of passage, I suppose. It's one of the squatchiest places out there. But I actually just got back from another trip this past 2 weeks out in Northern California and in Oregon. I saw Shane again. He actually took us to the spot where he had his sighting in 2011 in Oregon. So that was really interesting to do that. We went to Bluff Creek as well. We were at the Patterson-Gimlin film site. I mean, there's almost so much that we did in this last journey that I can't even remember it all. I'm actually in the process of working on the video about that now. So I'm kind of trying to retrace it all, because when you're out there, spending 2 weeks out in the field, oftentimes moving from location to location, the time kind of blends, right? I mean, it's fun. It's great. It's pretty tiring. It's definitely wears you out. And that first post-trip shower, you just see all the dirt and the grime coming off, the shower. Good thing it was a hotel shower. It's like just the black in the shower. I mean, it was gross, but that's what it's like out there when you're just bathing in rivers and creeks and, just trying to kind of live out there in the woods. But your needs and your day to day is a lot different. It's, what are we going to eat? What are we going to do for research tonight? How's my camera battery doing? You're not worrying about all the other things that so often consume our lives. So definitely an awesome kind of change up to the mundane sort of reality of life and, the craziness all around.
Alex, I'm going to rewind you a little bit. You just hit a bucket list for every Bigfoot researcher in the country, and went by it like it was no big deal. I mean, if anybody went to Bluff Creek, they would spend hours talking about it. If anybody went to the Olympic Peninsula, they would talk hours about it. So what was it like to go to Bluff Creek and see the site?
It was crazy. I mean, it's, kind of, I didn't mean to really gloss over it that way, but we, just because we did so much, it was like this from April to basically July, we did, all basically Washington, Oregon, California. And I hadn't really spent any time in Oregon or California. I'd been once just driving through Willow Creek while at the Redwoods, but I had never actually made it up to the film site. And I got to say, I mean, Bluff Creek, oh my God, what a place. We spent 5 nights down at Louse Camp, which is the camp that Tom Slick basically found after the original Jerry Crew prints were found in 1958 that birthed the name Bigfoot. So that camp is right, I mean, a stone's throw down from where those prints were found in the road and where they had those oil drums thrown into the water, into the creek there, which is Notice Creek, Bluff Creek. I've heard different people say different names. I kind of called it Notice Creek, beautiful crystal blue water. But we spent 5 nights down there and a night down at the Patterson-Gimlin film site. We actually slept right in the substrate where Patty walked in the famous frame 352 would have been right behind where our tents were. We'd backpack down there. And it's funny, that area where she walked, nothing has grown in, despite the fact that the film site has a lot more tree cover and different trees. I mean, entire trees have grown in. It's been 50 something years. It looks very different. Some of the original stumps are there. And that's what the Bluff Creek project, some of those guys have been able to find the original stumps from the film site. So that's why we know where it was. But there was a big flood that happened in 1964. That's the reason why that the tracks were so well preserved during the when that film was taken in 1967, because there's that substrate. You can still feel that silt today. I mean, you can punch into the ground and there's really, dig it up a little bit, punch in, and it leaves a very nice knuckle impression or, footprint. So that's how they were able to get those really good casts. But for some reason, that area where Patty walked, there's been nothing that's able to have been really grow tall in that area. So it's kind of cool. It's like you wonder why, but man, it was a trip. We did so much in that area. Just being there, you see the sheer wilderness even to this day. You're driving down these mountain roads for almost an hour and a half just to get once you get off the main road in an already small, very rural area, small town with a very rural kind of lifestyle up there. And there's the Hoopa Reservation, the Yurok Reservation nearby. Willow Creek is like 2.5 hours south of actually getting into Louse Camp. So it's not really close by. Bluff Creek is not as close to town as people think, but you feel like it's very remote. I mean, there's more people there now than there would have been maybe 10 years ago, just because the film site has been rediscovered within the last decade and there's more of an interest, but it's still extremely remote. You could fall off the trail onto one of the mountains and disappear out there easily.
Right.
Acquired knowledge of these creatures' habits provokes more questions and the motivation to get out in the woods and to find these answers. What questions stand out in the forefront to you that you are looking for the answers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me personally, it's become a little bit of a personal quest. I've had some experiences that have led me to believe that, not believe, to feel that these beings are real, these creatures, whatever they are. I don't know if they're something closer to humans or in between there. It seems that way to me, just based on the reports. But what I wonder the most is how do the regional adaptations affect the creatures on all these different areas? So, I'm from New England. We have a very different type of terrain than in Northern California, or even around Mount Hood in Oregon, or Colorado or Florida. There's so many of these different biomes that you go to. that have unique flora and fauna. A lot of the same animals. I mean, you get black bears in pretty much all these habitats, but we have moose up here in New England. I mean, these are 1,200-pound animals, fully grown. So they're pretty much competing with Sasquatch in that size and weight category, basically. Nothing else that really comes close around here. So what I wonder is, what about those regional adaptations? As a lot of researchers across the country have found, there seems to be maybe slight behavior differences, or, what resources are available. That's, I think, one of the most interesting questions to me. And that's something that I've kind of been able to continue asking myself and trying to find answers to while going to all these different areas. I'm trying to apply what I know about the woods in New England and say, well, is it different in North Carolina? It's still the same Appalachian mountain chain, but it's a little bit different terrain, maybe different species of tree and plant life slightly. But then you go to somewhere like Northern California, totally different. Talk about the redwoods compared to even where Bluff Creek is. Those are two different environments. It'll be 100 degrees in the afternoon in the Bluff Creek area, and you're surrounded by huge old growth Douglas fir trees. And then an hour to the west, you drive to the redwoods and it's 56 degrees and slight rain out. And you're surrounded by these 300-foot tall trees. So it's even within an area like that, these beings are obviously adapting and utilizing what they can in the environment.
Well, you touch.
Go ahead, Larry.
Okay, you interrupted me. You touched on some of the encounters you had that lead you to believe that these creatures are real. Talk about some of those encounters you've had.
Sure. Yeah. Some of the most prominent ones for me have been here in New Hampshire, kind of my home state. There's a lot of sightings that I've discovered of or heard of, been told about by folks. It's a bit more taboo here than it is in other parts of the country. You go to Northern California or Washington, Oregon, there's Bigfoot everywhere, right? I mean, it's a little more culturally acceptable. Most people still think of it as a joke, but a lot of people know somebody who's had an encounter, or they're a little bit more forthcoming about having an encounter. Up here, it's up until maybe 10, 15 years ago, a lot of people, even if they had an encounter, they didn't even think of it as Bigfoot because there was no cultural frame of reference. Right. So some of the most interesting stuff I've had happen, some of it up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, with some researcher friends in that area. We've had some pretty weird audio recordings and finding, I'm not a big stick structure guy, I guess, but we found interesting stick twists and things like that would just pop up, that weren't there a few days before, that suddenly would show up, or little formations, hearing vocalizations, smells. But for me, my personal case, which kind of fell into my lap, was really interesting down here in actually in southern New Hampshire. I don't like to give the specific location away, but long story short, it was a random time. I was camping in 2019 with a friend of mine in the area I was familiar with. We didn't have time to go up to the mountains. It was a Friday night. Said, let's just go camp somewhere nearby. I know a spot. I'd never camped in this area before. And we had some movement kind of around camp as we're sitting around the campfire. Just something will move to the left in the trees. And we're thinking, it's probably a bear, or maybe it could be a moose, something. I mean, there's tons of animals in that area. It's a very healthy ecosystem. I regularly go to this spot, and I have a game camera out there. I get moose and all kinds of stuff on there pretty regularly. And as I said, moose are big animals. So we're hearing these sounds. You'd hear it first to the left. You'd focus on that. Then you'd hear it to the right, something shuffling around. You hear it from behind you. Is 3 different directions. And we were just kind of taken aback. My friend is also interested in Sasquatch. So, you have to think critically. Not everything that moves in the woods is a Bigfoot, right? So we're sort of just hanging out, whatever. At one point, grab a flashlight, run into the woods right towards the sound. Nothing there that we can tell. So we just kind of treated it like a normal camp night, whatever, just some animals messing around. We go to bed. I had an audio recorder running that night, as I always do. Next day, we went camping to a different spot. Nothing weird happened. Didn't think anything of it. It wasn't actually until months later I was talking to some researcher friends, some with the BFRO, that had researched a case or had been involved in a property investigation in that same town. And I asked, where was that? Just curiosity wise. And then turns out geographically, it was like the closest house to where I was in this wooded areas. And you could walk from the woods to this person's property. So that kind of interested me. So I immediately went and reviewed my audio from 2 months ago that I hadn't reviewed until then. I mean, you get so much audio, sometimes it's tough to review. And I was actually pretty blown away to have we were getting knocks and, you know, pretty loud banging and stick throwing, what sounds like sticks throwing. You'll hear one knock close and then one further off. Yeah. Right away. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. You know, it's either people messing around with us or something else, you know? Right. So fast forward, you know, life kind of goes on. This was right at the end of 2019. So then COVID hits, world's upside down, started working from home, had a lot more free time on my hands, no commuting. So I would go out to this wooded spot pretty much every day, mostly for the purpose of trying to get moose. I'd seen a couple moose in there, and every time I was in there, I had this one encounter with this female moose, and I only had my cell phone on me. I didn't have a good camera on me, so I started carrying, you know, my Canon on me so I could get some good pictures. And then it was through, you know, going out there almost daily. Had a couple times we had some wood knocking incidents right as it was getting dark, and then I was up there in March 2020, had an incident where basically I heard gunshots coming from one area. Not uncommon, you know, people go out in these rural areas to shoot. It's pretty much like that across the U.S. You guys are familiar with that kind of thing as well. Local shooting pits, you know, we've all done that. And I hear the gunshots from there, and I had heard some turkeys flying. I had found tracks in the snow. And from the opposite side of where the gunshots came, I was in this little clearing that had been logged out. So basically, it was a state forest, and the state had logged this area out. And moose actually like to feed in areas that have been logged out. It's a lot easier for them to move in there. And you know, I was finding tons of moose scat in piles there, so that's why I was hanging out in that area. But from the opposite side of the gunshots, I hear what sound like knocks. I mean, it was either extremely far away gunshots or knocks. And I took a stick and I kind of banged back, saying I got a response immediately, and then nothing else. I was kind of like, okay, this is interesting. Starting to get dark. I was alone. I decided to head back. Go back the next day with my brother. There's power lines that cut through that area, which is, you know, kind of a common motif with this subject as well. We're walking along the power line at night. We get to the spot where it's basically overlooking this little marshy area and the clear cut where I was in, where I heard those knocks. I'm pulling my audio recorder out. One loud, clear power knock, almost sounded like on metal. I think that maybe it had hit there was a couple of the power lines, big metal. So we hear it. I immediately turned to my brother. I said, you know, what did you hear? Can you tell me what you heard? He said, I mean, that sounded like a knock. Press record on the audio, didn't get anything the rest of the night. Yeah. So then, you know, after that, I went in there every day, you know, not really with the intention of trying to have something happen, but just observing, trying to understand what was going on. I just like being in the woods. I mean, it's a good time, you know, whether it be looking for moose or the other animals or, you know, things happening. Most of the time I went in there, nothing weird happened. A couple times I had some strange things happen. Had a tree come down behind me in the woods with no wind at all. And, you know, something sounded like something kind of moving around. And I thought to myself, okay, yeah, it's possible trees can just fall over by themselves. I've seen it happen, you know, if it's the perfect timing, of course, but with other movement, it was a little strange. And actually in the BFRO case, some of the researchers I knew, they had a tree pushed over in that same general area when they were out there investigating this property. And at that same time, I befriended the property owner in that case. He's actually featured his interviews in the first episode of Beyond the Trail, which is the Granite State Bigfoot case. That's pretty much this full story that I'm telling now in the film, as well as his interview and interviews with the BFRO researchers that were involved during that case. So it became really interesting to me talking to him and hearing some of the things he had to say. Rocks thrown at the house, had possible visual. He had seen something kind of in this area on all fours. Rock thrown at a screen right in front of his face one evening. Other things, there's been other things since then as well. But one of the most interesting encounters, or supposed encounters, I can't say they're definitive, of course. I haven't had any visuals, but I've been out there a lot, and majority of the times nothing happens or something ordinary happens. But a few out of those times we've had weird stuff happen. So it's not like I go out there every day and, you know, I'm communicating and there's things happening, you know, that I'm not claiming that at all, but it was April of 2020. So about a month after some of those interesting knocking incidents happened. And I'm out there with a friend doing a night hike Didn't tell him anything about the area, the history. He knew I'm into the subject. He was one of my hiking buddies. We'd actually been hiking all the New Hampshire 4,000 footers together. So been backpacking with this guy a lot. We've encountered a lot of stuff out in the woods in way more remote areas up north. So, we were just kind of doing a little night hike. We get to this area where there's this strange structure, which I call a structure. I mean, it could have been built by kids. It's just this sort of these branches woven, and it looks funky. You see it and it looks like it doesn't belong. I mean, it could be people, might not be. Either way, I don't really consider it to be a big deal. But we stop at that area. We decide to start going back. And then I get this unmistakable feeling, which I've only gotten a few times out in the woods, of you feeling like you're being watched. And I know that's cliche. People say that happens to them all the time. And when it's prominent, it's prominent. This was like, I could feel it. I was thinking in my head, man, I feel like we're being watched. And that same exact moment, my friend basically just blurts out, dude, I think we're being watched. And I turn to him and I'm like, how the heck did you know what I was thinking? That's impossible. And he's like, I don't know, man. I'm just getting this weird feeling. So we keep going along our way. We start hearing something behind us, kind of shuffling around. And we turn to face that area. And then from behind us for about 10 minutes, we listened to something breaking a branch and doing some loud knocks. Had my audio recorder the whole time and just kind of stood there with the hair on the back of my neck, standing up. I'd later been to that location in the daytime. It's a swampy area. I mean, nobody's ever out there at night. It was really interesting. And there's been other incidences. 4th of July last year, we did fireworks out there. And then around 1 a.m., we had something coming in and doing knocks around the same initial camp where I'd had those recordings in 2019. And then since then, I've just been going back periodically, been a little less now, just because we've been traveling a lot. But the last thing I had happen out there was in late May. I had a trail camera out there, mostly for moose and other animals. I love getting, seeing what kind of animals are just moving through the area. I don't believe I'm going to get a Sasquatch on there. I think they're a little too smart for the trail cameras. But I was just going out there to swap a card. I do a live stream every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern on my channel, Sasquatch Out of the Shadows. So I didn't have a whole lot of time. So I just kind of went out there, swapped the cards. And then I'd never done hand claps before. So I just kind of randomly did 3 hand claps. As some researchers have stated, possibility some of the knocks are done by hands or other body parts, chest thumping or tooth clicking. There's a point actually brought up by Shane and some of the folks in the Olympics that say, majority of the time out there, it's wet. Like you can pick up a stick and bang it against a tree in a rainforest. It won't make a knock sound. Out here, it's a little different. You can find a lot of drier wood. So I just decided to do hand claps. And immediately I got 4 responses that sounded like somebody hitting kind of what I describe as a wood bonk. It was like a bonk, 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 bonk. And then you hear, and I listened for a little bit. I did some more hand claps, nothing. As soon as I started getting ready to move out, heard more knocks, recording the whole thing. I have them all recorded. And then as I'm leaving to go back to my car and walk through the woods, I hear the knocks coming from, it sounds like from where I had been, with the trail camera. It had like moved, the sound had moved, which I thought was pretty interesting. So yeah, that case has been fascinating. I mean, the fact that it all kind of fell into my lap. I never really considered that area. I don't know why in retrospect. I'd known about this area for a while, and there's some like ghost stories in that area that I think might be attributable to Sasquatch. I think people talk about weird things happening in the woods and creepy feeling. And I have a theory that a lot of these ghost encounters that happen in maybe haunted forests and these kinds of places are actually Sasquatch behavior that's being interpreted as ghost behavior. Because that's more on people's radar than something like a Sasquatch. So, that's been a very interesting case. But we've had other stuff happen in other parts of the country as well, out in Ohio and down south. A lot of interesting things that have happened. Never any visuals, but between knocks and the rock throwing and that kind of stuff, and hearing stuff come crashing down. I mean, just recently, Bluff Creek, we were in Laird Meadow, which is a famous area. There's been a lot of casts taken out of that meadow up there in the mountains. Roger Patterson had made a couple casts in that area, and we were doing some knocks, and we had split up into teams, and we had something come crashing down behind us and then a knock from that area, and it wasn't the other team, and it left us kind of perplexed. I'm still reviewing that audio from that night. So it's been a lot of little things, but I think for me the biggest part, taking out my personal experiences, which, I'm an eyewitness. If you want to say eyewitness or experiencer, people are unreliable, I suppose. So I'm trying to not use my personal experiences to taint my pursuit of the subject, and say objectively, well, what if this and this was going on? But talking to a lot of people, and, I have a number of encounters of folks that have told me their stories that I kind of keep in like a special spot, to me, stand out because of the credibility, whether the person, not necessarily their background, maybe their professional careers, just how I grade them as a witness and what they observed and the way they act about their sighting, not wanting attention, really wanting nothing to do with it. They'll basically tell you the story, or people you wouldn't even expect to have had an encounter. That for me has been really interesting, even before I had some experiences saying, why would these people make up these stories? It makes no sense. I don't see why they have anything to gain with a story like this. If anything, especially in some of the positions these people have been in, I think that would detract from their credibility. They might lose, economic opportunities because of talking about a story like this. So it really makes you wonder.
I agree with that.
Going back and you're talking about people that are into ghost hunting. I know several researchers that go to these ghost message boards and look for possible areas where Sasquatch might move through the area at, because, like one guy told me, he says, you read, what they witnessed out there, and it don't sound nothing like ghost. It sounds more like Sasquatch. But let's say that you were going to take somebody new into your area. For our audience, how would you describe your methods of field research?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for the longest time, I didn't really consider myself to be a field researcher. I thought that was a little bit overused of a term. And I kind of just said I was a cryptozoology researcher. So my way of researching the subject is through filmmaking, and that involves the process of doing a documentary film. You're getting boots on the ground, right? You're going to an area, you're filming an area, you're just kind of getting out there, you're talking to people. You go to some of these spots. I'm not going to walk into some forest in the Pacific Northwest and assume I know everything. That's just stupid. I will talk to people who actually know about the area. This subject, sure, there might not be any experts, but there's people who maybe have a little bit of a more educated guess about where the encounters have been, or maybe they've been researching an area for 20 years. I mean, I want to talk to them. I want to hear what they know about the area. What do you know about the wildlife in the area? What are the habits of the elk or the moose or whatever might be living in that area? Where do they move? Where do the sighting reports come from? So, I think it's just arrogant to assume you can just go into an area and, immediately kind of know what's going on, do your research. But I think approaching it from that filmmaker lens, you're really trying to talk to a variety of people involved, even if they're a little bit skeptical. They say, well, maybe this thing doesn't exist here. Yeah, I want to know why. Can you tell me why? Are you willing to talk about that? And then through a film, you kind of present it. I try to present it in an unbiased way and say, basically lay the facts out, let people make up their own conclusions while showcasing an area. But if I was to take somebody out into my research area, my techniques, I think just being observant is the biggest one. I go out there, I don't do anything super elaborate. I don't really even leave food all that often. I've done that in the past. I've tried a lot of the techniques. I've tried shouting in the woods. I've tried the calls. I do a little bit of the knocks every once in a while because we've had some responses. Like I said, last time I did pretty loud hand claps. I mean, I can do those ones where you cup your hands and it sounds pretty good in the recorder. When I listen back to it, it sounds like a wood knock. Do that sort of thing. And I just, like I said, being observant, just listen to the other sounds, because sometimes you'll hear things that may sound like knocks or may sound like movement. Could be a chipmunk, especially if it's at night and you're hearing something moving through. A lot of times little animals can sound a lot bigger. It can be scarier. A lot of people get nervous out in the woods at night. I've noticed, even researchers, they just get freaked out. Maybe they've had experiences that freak them out. Fair enough. I know people like that. I've had some pretty terrifying stuff happen out there. So I would definitely, I can sympathize with them, but just be familiar with the sounds that are going on, what other animals might be existing there, know your equipment, that kind of thing. But in terms of my technique, I don't know. I just try to be observant, try not to show that I'm a threat. I'm always armed when I'm out there, but you got to assume that you're making it clear enough that it's not intended for any harmful use. It's just strictly a self-defense kind of thing. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that I have super formal techniques. Just kind of get out there, observe, try to see what's going on. Has anything changed in the environment? Do I notice any weird things? I look for tracks, obviously. Where are the deer moving through now? Where are the moose moving through? So I think a lot of it comes down to if you know a particular area very well. When I did survival training in high school, we did this kind of Native American technique called a secret spot, where basically you were assigned to an area, small, maybe 100-foot in diameter area. That was your secret spot. Your task was to learn that area and know it as well as you might know your own home or your room or your office, right? So if I'm just woken up in the middle of the night, lights are all off, I need to walk to the bathroom. I can do that without tripping, in my own home, because I know where everything is. Now, you try to do that in the woods. Be so familiar with a place that when something changes. That's not easy. You really got to spend time doing that. And even in my kind of main research spot, I don't spend that much time that I would know that. It's also a large area we're dealing with, but try to be a little bit familiar with what's going on. I've seen throughout, even just having a trail camera out there, noticing turkey hunters coming through, other people utilizing the area. It's not just you that's out there a lot of the times, depending on how remote the area is. So I think just being observant is the number one thing in general. Being observant and aware of what is out there, other animals, other creatures in the area.
I think that's great advice.
Definitely.
Just kind of a follow-up to that. What type of instrumentation do you take out there, such as audio recorders, cameras, plot watchers, thermals, or anything like that?
Sure. When I'm out in my spot, I always have audio rolling. So I basically will take Zoom audio, which I don't have. I have the Zoom H1s, which I use for even my interviews and stuff like that. I do narration on them. They're great. I've got a couple of those little guys. I just haven't, you can tuck it right into like the strap of a backpack. I just have the audio rolling just in case. You never know. If I've made the mistake plenty of times of not having audio rolling in time, especially like that time back in March when I'm pulling it out and we had that knock right before. Yeah. You kind of learn from your mistakes. So always good to just have audio rolling. That's an important thing. Always have a cell phone. So I actually kind of have, let's see if I can find this thing here. I have a little bit of I don't want to say tactical cell phone holster, but I will share this with people because people ask me, like, what is this thing? I wear my my cell phone on in this pouch. This is actually a magazine pouch. So this is what you'd get for like an AR or an AK magazine. You just slip it right in. Phone actually fits perfectly in here. So just have it right in here. Retention is great. I always struggle with the idea of having the phone kind of in your pocket. It's inconvenient. Not only does this look cool, it's super practical. When I need it, pops right out. And like I said, the retention is fantastic. So that's something I always have. Just in case you got to get quick video, I'll oftentimes bring out either GoPro or like a Sony Handycam as a backup, more higher quality video. But sometimes when you're just out, you got to go real quick. I have like a pack that I just have that has all the stuff that I need in there. So that'll include, your field guides. I've got one of those Jeff Meldrum Sasquatch guides. I have a regular North American wildlife guide that has, examples of scat, of all kinds of different animals, tracks, what to look for. I'll have a tape measure or at least like a dollar bill. That's something I like. It's important to have because if you don't have a tape measure, just grab a dollar bill. If you get a track, you can put this right next to it. A lot of people have these, so they're very universal. So it's easy to get measurements if you don't have anything else. But a tape measure is probably a better call. But if you can't pack a dollar bill, that's just kind of the basic stuff. If we get more fancy, if we're going out for night stuff or some of the stuff we've done with Beyond the Trail, we've used pheromone chips. We've been trying out those. I actually got one of those wooden squatch knockers. don't even know where it is. It's somewhere around here. I got it at the North American Bigfoot Center in that's Cliffs Museum in Oregon. Really cool. Makes, you know, it's just a convenient little, it's basically a mini baseball bat. You can just whack it against a tree if you're trying to do a knock. A little bit easier than maybe finding some wood in the area. But FLIR units, you know, we use the FLIR Scout. That's something I've been using for a little bit now if I'm out there at night. And just like, I think running audio is really important. I think audio is a great way to get things going on. Cameras may be a little bit more invasive, but if you have the right technique, it's better to have even just a cell phone, especially with the way cell phones are getting nowadays. It's better to have a cell phone than not have one if you can't have a camera or something on you. So that's just like the daily stuff when I'm out there, because you really never know. I mean, when you're out in the field, something can happen. I think it's a little different when we're on these expeditions, because we're have like 5-6 days in the same location. So we're constantly geared toward that goal. But when I'm just going out to swap a card on a game camera, or just kind of moving around just to get out in the woods a little bit, break up my day, I still like to bring some of those basic items just in case you're to have something happen. Let's say you find a track or something like that. You have something to at least measure it, document it with, maybe cover it up, come back later if you want to make a cast. Even if it's just a moose print or something cool that you want to just have for your general collection. Nothing wrong with that. Just nice to have a few things out in the field.
Yeah, audio's our little niche in this community, and someone that you probably know that we have worked with is David Ellis.
Yeah,
and man, he's just such an asset to
he knows his stuff.
Yeah, to this community. But you know, we learned a long time ago, before you even get out of the vehicle, to cut that recorder on. Right. Because the first time that we stepped out and had a wood knock happen before we even got the car doors shut, you know, that was a lesson learned. And
the classic "they're here" knock.
And you were talking about like the dollar bill. Everybody knows the size of a dollar bill.
Yep. Or
a cigarette lighter. And so that's something that's really good, you know, to have on you. And maybe just hold up one of my walking sticks.
Nice.
But I've got like 1 inch increments.
Perfect.
You know, on my walking stick. So I've always got a tape measure on me. Tell us, a lot of our audience is going to want to know about small town monsters. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your involvement?
Yeah, totally. Just to finish up that point about the size thing, you know, sometimes I see photos people will post of a track and they'll put their hand next to it, or their pocket knife, or even their foot. I get that, you know, that's better than nothing, but a lot, you know, it can be contested, you know, well, what if that's not the size it is? So that's why, like you said, having something like your walking stick or just a dollar bill, if you can't have a tape measure or something else, super easy. Dollar weighs almost nothing, you know, it's literally not worth its own weight almost. So it just pack a few if you need. But yeah, as for small town monsters, it's been really awesome to be involved with small town monsters now for a while. Just kind of became friends with Seth, and on and off doing projects. You know, the first one I really did with them was On the Trail of Champ, which was kind of the beginning of the On the Trail of series, which is now morphed into so many awesome series: On the Trail of UFOs, On the Trail of Bigfoot, On the Trail of Hauntings, On the Trail of Lake Michigan Mothman. But that was basically just project about the Lake Champlain monster, which is one of my favorite non-Bigfoot cryptids, which is just it's America's Loch Ness. I mean, fantastic story overall. But just sporadically throughout the years, been working with Seth on a lot of the projects, and now a little bit more regularly with some of these Beyond the Trail of series. So that's kind of a spin-off or a tag-along series to the On the Trail of. So you have On the Trail of Bigfoot. You know, On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Journey just came out. We filmed that last summer while up in the Adirondacks in Western Massachusetts, hanging out with Steve Culls and Paul Bartholomew, Jonathan Wilk, Squatchachusetts. Lots of great folks up there in that kind of Adirondack and Western Massachusetts region. But Beyond the Trail is sort of it's like we're taking a step further. We're diving a little more in depth into areas that maybe have been overlooked, or just kind of doing our own adventures, and they will coincide. So, for example, when we were in the Olympics in April, That was when we were filming On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Discovery, which is basically all about the Olympic project. I mean, Seth interviewed, I want to say, all the major members. I mean, from Derek to David, Shane, a lot of people. Some people that maybe a lot of folks aren't even aware of because they're a little bit more behind the scenes. There's a lot of people that are in the public eye, a lot of the folks in those kinds of groups that are a little bit more reserved because they maybe have more of a profession they're trying to maintain or not just be in the limelight as much. Be a little bit more secluded and that kind of thing. So for a project like that, we were filming at the same time Beyond the Trail. So those two projects will kind of coincide. They'll cross over. They're going to be different, but similar because they're about the same topic. They're about the nest sites and what the Olympic project does, but also that area in general. So yeah, no, Small Town Monsters is awesome. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but it's just what I love the most about it is the diversity of topics, I suppose, in paranormal cryptozoology, because it's not just Bigfoot. I mean, yeah, we're focusing a lot on Bigfoot now, but there's the Bell Witch. There's going to be a lot, the Rougarou, which is a little bit more paranormal. You've got UFOs. Obviously, that's a different topic, and I've been involved in that as well because of my own UFO experiences, which kind of happened coincidentally as well while doing sort of Bigfoot stuff. So yeah, it's been awesome. It's really just a fun journey, and it's always fun to see where Small Town Monsters will end up next because we end up in a lot of weird places and places that you didn't think you'd ever make it to. Like you said, those bucket list places. I mean, in the same year, within a few months, we hit Washington, Oregon, and California. I mean, that's just like crazy. And it's just I've been blessed to be involved with like-minded people and people that, like myself, care about the subjects. We're not just doing this because we want to, do films about it. There's tons of companies and Hollywood and all these guys doing shows about Bigfoot or cryptids, and most of the crew doesn't care. They're just in it because, it's the new gig. They'll be doing a show on some other topic in a week. We're actually into it. If we weren't doing this, if I wasn't doing these films, I'd still be probably doing research or really interested in this topic and getting out there. But this is just kind of my way of approaching it. And I think that Small Town Monsters has resonated so well with people because the people who actually make the films and are interested in the films, or I should say in the topics, do care about it. It's like we're almost making content for people like ourselves. What would we want to see? Because we see so many of these TV shows that leave a lot to be desired, right? They're done from a Hollywood producer standpoint, which is, they're trying to get marketing traction with the general populace, not this niche kind of community with cryptids and Bigfoot people, or, people into Bigfoot, I should say.
You talked about at Lake Champlain, and that monster has been nicknamed Champ. Yep. I would really be interested in hearing what you know about it and the different conclusions that you have came to.
Sure. It is, man, I got to tell you, it's one of those things that just kind of has taken off. It's funny. I was always more interested in Loch Ness growing up, despite the fact that Lake Champlain is about 2.5 hours from me. If I was to sit in the car right now and drive, I could be in Burlington, Vermont, or Port Henry, New York in 2 or 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. Whereas when I was growing up, I was like, I don't really care about Champ. I care about Loch Ness. And as I've grown older, I visited Loch Ness, and I've lost interest in Loch Ness and gained interest in Lake Champlain. I mean, it makes sense, right? I don't know either. But when I did On the Trail of Champ, that was really my first kind of exposure to going to Lake Champlain, spending some time there, and I've just been hooked. It is not only, to me, one of the most beautiful places in the world. To set the scene, Lake Champlain is this ancient lake that was formed from what used to be connected to the ocean. Very recent history. We're talking, possibly 10,000 years ago. Even more recent, just when people were in the area, basically humans would have witnessed this going on. But it's this beautiful ancient lake, one of the largest in the country. I mean, it's small compared to the Great Lakes, but then again, everything is, because those are monsters of lakes. But Lake Champlain is 120 miles long, about 12, 13 miles wide at the widest, almost 430 feet deep at the deepest. And it stretches all the way from Whitehall, New York, which is famous for Bigfoot, all the way up to the Canadian border, and it's amazing. It's nestled between the Adirondack Mountains and the Green Mountains of Vermont. So on either side, you can have these magnificent mountain views. And the stories that have been told over the centuries were of this strange creature, at times known as Champ or Champy. Before Loch Ness was even known in the 1870s, it was called the Lake Champlain sea serpent. P.T. Barnum even put up money for this thing, dead or alive. There was a serpent craze going on even in the Whitehall area. That's actually, the Whitehall Times wrote a lot about Champ sightings. And through my time going there, I go there pretty often. I'm actually heading back there in August 7th. There's this Champ Day event going on in Port Henry, New York, which is the self-proclaimed home of Champ. And they have a lot of the sightings. They have that famous red kind of wooden road stop thing that you can see that has all the Champ sightings and the list of all the sightings. And they're having a Champ Day event. I'm actually heading up there, and there's going to be some other awesome people, including Carrick St. Laurent, Paul Bartholomew, Kenny Irish. We're going to do kind of like a meet and greet sort of thing. And it's a beautiful place to be. Any excuse to go up there for me is fine. But having spoken to a lot of people that are pretty credible, it's a similar thing to Bigfoot, where you have something going on here. I don't know what it is in Lake Champlain. Obviously, the most popular theory is plesiosaur, right? As unlikely as that might be, or some kind of aquatic reptile. I've even heard some kind of a giant turtle, which I think is a very interesting theory. People have said seals and whales, but the lake is landlocked, and there would be a lot more sightings. But every few years, there's some pretty good sightings. Last year, actually, during COVID, there was a really big spike in sightings, because not only was international shipping between Canada and the U.S. stopped, the water clarity got way better, because you had these huge boats coming in from Quebec into the United States that was halted, and you had a lot more people out on the lake than maybe previous years. People weren't traveling in other parts of the country. They were very localized, so more people were going out in the water, and there was a lot of sightings even in St. Albans Bay, where the famous San Romancy photo took place. So yeah, there's also, I have a group of people that I've interviewed and talked to that kind of stand apart to me as very credible witnesses that have spent time in the lake, lived on the lake their entire lives, know what else is out there, and have had something weird happen that they genuinely can't explain. And that is enough for me to say, well, there could be something going on here.
What would be your second favorite cryptid to Bigfoot?
See, I often say that Champ actually is my favorite cryptid.
Okay.
I think, I love the Bigfoot topic, and I think the biggest reason I love it is because of how widespread it is, because you can go to different parts of New England and hear the local stories. Oh, the Durham gorilla case in Maine, or the Bennington monster in Vermont, the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. You can go to Arizona, Mogollon monster. You can go to Bluff Creek. You can go to Fouke, Arkansas. You can go to Remmer, Minnesota. You can go all over the place and hear about the local big stories. But I think something like Champ is just so unique. It's regionalized because it's something that's in one lake. I mean, you can't go to every lake and have Champ, the same exact monster. There are other lake monsters, but I do like some of those unique ones. Probably, so I'd say Champ is probably my favorite. Bigfoot is definitely number two, and it do impart a lot to the regional factor because you can go anywhere. After that, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of really good ones. The Dover Demon, I think, is a great one, just because I used to work basically a town over from Dover, Massachusetts, suburb of Boston. It's like a very wealthy town now, but yeah, that story is so prolific. It was only seen a few times in 1977, and it's still talked about to this day. It's still one of the most popular cryptids out there, which is pretty wild. And I think some of the sea monster reports over the years have been pretty interesting. I like, in particular, the Great New England Sea Serpent, I think, is interesting. Cadborosaurus, too, out on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Well,
There's so many cryptids. I do got to say, probably before even the Dover Demon, I would put the Altamaha down in Georgia. I think that's a really interesting one.
Some of them I've not heard of. I was hoping he's going to say little people, Mark.
Well, we do have a lot of Pukwudgie stories in New England, so there's a lot of little people stories, that's for sure.
Yeah. Did I may be wrong, but did you not go to Ape Canyon with Mark Marcel?
Not yet. That is
Not yet.
So that's something we were. So basically, on this past trip, we went out, as I mentioned, a week out in Northern California and then a week out in Oregon. We were thinking about, do we squeeze an Ape Canyon trip in? But I just didn't feel it was right. I felt, if we're going to Oregon, we're going to do the Mount Hood area. There's enough there between some of the stuff that Cliff Barrickman and Connor Anderson have, the reports that they've gathered at the North American Bigfoot Center. So we spent a lot of time with Connor, who was basically Cliff's right-hand man. He runs the museum when Cliff's not there, along with a lot of other great people that work there, and Cliff's wife, Melissa. They're all really awesome. Super great place. If you're ever in that area in Oregon, and you're into the subject, you have to go there. It's that good. But they showed us a lot of their spots, their research spots, and where they've had consistent reports coming in from the 70s, from Joe Bielert and other researchers. Amazing. But we didn't want to stretch it with an Ape Canyon trip. And we actually did see Mark Mazel. We stayed at his house. He's just such an awesome dude. We met him up in the Olympics in April. Oh, that guy is the real deal. Him and his research partner have really done a good job about that Ape Canyon story. And we're going to save that probably maybe this upcoming year. We're going to do a full kind of going down to Ape Canyon, possibly even going around the other side of the mountain. A lot of the folks in the Olympic project are involved with that whole Ape Canyon story. So there's a lot to work with there, and they're super awesome. So, we definitely want to make a trek into Ape Canyon at some point.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, we've had Mark on a couple of times, and I would just love to go through his aquarium.
Oh, I know. We wanted to go up, but it's actually it's a little bit further from kind of the Portland area where we were based at. But I'm sure we'll get there at some point. But yeah, talk about an awesome guy. We met him, as I mentioned, up in April, up in the Olympics, when the whole kind of project came together. And it was like, oh, Mr. Ape Canyon, basically. And just hearing some of the details about the incidents around their discovery of that site, and the other experiences they've had, footprints they found. It seems like 100 years later, those things are still there. Probably the descendants of the ones that were attacking the cabin,
right?
Which is awesome.
Right. Yeah,
true. What surprises me about the guys from the Olympic project? They're nice guys whenever you're talking to them, and they say come out. But I know my lady, Debbie Jones, and the Sisters of the Moon, they told them to come out. Shane set them up at the Olympic Project cabin and let them pretty much have the run of the place for a couple of days. They're not just selling, they are good guys that are going to let you in. Yeah. And that's
totally.
refreshing.
They're not just gonna kind of guide you around, and if you want, they totally will. We got to see a lot of these areas when we were in the nest sites, for example. That area is obviously kept on a pretty tight lid. There's property issues. You don't want just everybody running around. They've been entrusted to that area, and as filmmakers and fellow researchers, we can only respect that. And if they give you the privilege to do that, I'm whatever you want. I'm good. I will not break the rules or anything. So it's interesting to get them to talk about some of the stuff they found over the years. But yeah, like you said, once you're up at the cabin there, they pretty much say, if you want to go walk off into the woods and look for mountain lions, go for it. Do whatever you want. Basically, they're not gatekeeping their own areas, which is really cool. They're, like I said, I can't praise them enough. There's so many great Bigfoot research groups out there, and that's one of my favorite parts of this field is meeting some of the people, and they're easily in the cream of the crop for me. Just people I've met out there that are, because you don't know them at first. Like, people are just basically a guy you've known off the internet for a while, and they're entrusting you into the area, and then you see that they're just the most down to earth people, and it's very refreshing for sure.
Just beware whenever you're there. If you go on the hiking trails back in the public area, the girls run into a naked hiker.
Oh boy. There are trails up there. The reason, from what I gathered and what was told to me, was the reason they got that property is because of the amount of road crossing sightings that had happened up there. It was really interesting for us was we did a little hike with Shane up to this kind of cave up there, where there's been some incidents, members have been roared at and had some strange stuff happen. But we found immediately right in the middle of the trail, we're finding these kind of little piles of dirt being dug up, small. And, some of them were kind of wet, smelled like cat urine, started finding prints. So then we get onto this logging road. In the mud, we find these beautiful, immaculate mountain lion prints just right there in the mud. And it was very fresh. I mean, within a couple hours. So you're basically on the trail of a mountain lion. So there's all kinds of stuff out there. And they've gotten, of course, on their trail cameras, generations of mountain lions in that area. But for me, especially as somebody, I've done my project Lions of the East, which was about mountain lions out in New England and the controversy and in parts of the South and general the Eastern seaboard. There's the whole mountain lion controversy. So for me, it's really always cool when I'm in areas where there are mountain lions and I'm able to actually observe their behaviors when there's them in larger numbers. So for me, that was like a trip. We're finding these prints and we were just amazed by it. It was just, knowing that they were basically just right there. And obviously it kind of, it makes you be aware even more. It says, well, you're dealing with another large apex predator in this area. Keep your head on a swivel.
Definitely.
Don't get cocky.
I wanted to tell the audience that if you have questions, put them in all caps and I will try to catch them. There was one earlier, but I tried to go back and find it and I can't find it. So if you're the one that asked a question, please put it up there again. And there's something that I try to ask people because we have experienced it so many times where you have possible Bigfoot activity going on around you and the batteries in all of your electronic devices, not just yours, but everybody that's with you, they just go kaput, they die. And then it's like when the activity is over with, all of a sudden your batteries are working again, just, and that they were fully charged and there was no reason. Has that happened to you? And do you have any theories on what might be going on for us?
Sure. Yeah, that's one of the most frustrating things out in the field when you have issues like that. We're dealing with so many different cameras, especially because we're not just doing research. We're also trying to make a video, trying to film and do this kind of stuff. So you've got GoPro and the Handycam and the A7S batteries, all this stuff to deal with. I've had a couple times though in the past, one time in 2016, up in the White Mountains in this area. I was researching. I was going every week up there to hang out with a friend of mine who's kind of a Native American researcher. That's the angle that he approaches it from. And I had fresh GoPro batteries. At that time, I was wearing my GoPro all the time, always had it kind of on, ton of fresh batteries. And we get up there and like all of them were dead. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I charge them on the way up. I know that they're charged. And he just kind of smiled and laughed at me and said, that's just kind of what happens with this topic. A lot of people on the more paranormal side think, oh, that's some kind of zapping. I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily think these things are paranormal. But at the same time, I don't try to discount people who've had those weirder experiences. I know a few people who I would deem pretty credible that have had things that they just can't explain, in terms of weirder things, whether it be orbs and that sort of stuff. So I don't know if there's some kind of electromagnetic manipulation going on or what the infrasound. I mean, that's such a frontier with infrasound. We really don't understand anything. I mean, the fact that elephants use it to communicate underground for miles, that's something that, 30 years ago, I could talk about to somebody and they say, oh, that sounds like a magical power, but it's actually a reality that these animals, elephants and other species can use infrasound to communicate or to stun their prey. I don't know. I mean, that's probably my best guess. I really have no clue what the battery stuff would be about aside from that. I mean, you hear some of these stories about people getting roared at Brian and Chewy, actually, who I've had on my show, great guy, a fellow hiker here in New Hampshire. He had that roar where he was roared at and felt it in the chest. And that's something I've heard. I mean, maybe there's some kind of effect there that messes with technology with those kinds of things. I don't really know. I mean, I've only had the battery stuff happen a few times, but I've heard it plenty of times from other researchers as well. And, some people, I take their word for it. Something genuinely mysterious. All the batteries are dead. I don't know what's going on there.
We've got a question from Can Squatch. any luck with the trail cam in catching image or evidence of a Sasquatch?
Honestly, I can't say no, not with the trail cameras that I've used. And as I mentioned, I do deploy a trail camera out in my kind of go-to research spot every once in a while. And I've got to actually get it back out there just because I like to see the other animals, but nothing unusual. I have videos of deer basically right when that trigger goes, looking right at it. They'll look directly into, and a lot of people have postulated, a lot of animals probably do see the IR. And I would imagine Sasquatch, if a deer can see it, a Sasquatch probably can. So they might maybe avoid it. I tend to think that some of the trail camera videos where it's, right next to it or walking by, I don't know if that's necessarily genuine or not, but you see some of those ones where it's in the distance. Maybe you just see something kind of swaying through the trees, looking a cautious distance. Possibly that's a little bit more interesting to me, but I don't know. I mean, something with people like to use that argument, right? Oh, there's thousands of trail cameras out in the woods. Why haven't we gotten one yet? Well, as I was talking about that secret spot exercise earlier, I mean, let's say you're in your house and somebody just puts a big rock or a small rock in the middle of the room or tries to hide it somewhere in your house. And you're like, what the heck is this thing doing here? This doesn't belong. This is not, that's my, collection of antiques. Why is there a rock? This, it's the same thing maybe in the woods. You see something that sticks out. Apes, chimps, gorillas have been known to observe where trail cameras are and avoid them and kind of be very cautious around them. So it doesn't really surprise me, I suppose, that we haven't gotten anything super definitive with trail cameras. And I'm not really under the impression that I'm going to get something convincing. That would be great, trail camera, but I think there's other methods that are FLIR, and some of the thermal imaging I think is more promising, at least to me, than trail cameras.
Yeah. And we tend ourselves to kind of stay away from them.
Yeah.
But we have found that plot watchers are really good because they just take a picture. They don't use a IR light,
right.
And you can set them up to take a picture every second, and it puts it in a video format. Sure. Okay. JJ asked, have you recorded any vocalizations that might be Bigfoot?
Possibly. We have some vocalizations over the years that we've recorded that are interesting. I have some in between some of my knocking audio. I've gotten possible, sounds like whooping kind of going on. Back to the thing we were talking about with the audio recorders and the batteries having issues. Human error, I think, a lot of times plays a part. So on this last trip in Oregon, we were camped near this area that has a long history of sightings in the Mount Hood Wilderness area. We'd heard possible growls during the day. I swear I was woken up around 5:30 in the morning by something vocalizing. And then when we woke up later on, I went back to sleep thinking, the audio, we'll just review it on the audio, Two of the guys in the tent next to me, my buddy Eli and another guy were in a tent kind of next to me. They said that they were woken up at 6 in.the.morning by what sounded like knocking. They both were woken up by something not far out of camp. So then, I'm like, okay, great. We'll review this audio. It's going to be awesome. So we go and grab the one Zoom audio, and there's only 2 minutes of recording on it. And it's us pouring water. And getting ready for bed, and I guess the chair shifted and the audio recorder must have shut itself off. But very frustrating. That kind of stuff happens in the field. Moral of the story there is always run 2 audio recorders. I had an issue with both of my Zooms, so that's why we were only running one Zoom, Eli Zoom. But otherwise, that was very frustrating. But yeah, in terms of vocals, possibly. I don't know. About the vocals, the knocks. I think some of them very likely are Sasquatch, just because of the prominence and the percussiveness. You'll hear one knock in one area and then another. It's almost as if it's a knock and a response. You'll hear just a very loud. I have one of the most prominent knocks I have. It's a very loud, very close to camp, and then there's almost like a huff afterwards. It's you can hear like this noise after. So possible. I can't say for sure, but it leads me to believe that it might be.
Okay. We have a question from Debbie Jones, and she was watching the video we were playing a while ago, and she says, what kind of camera did you have in the Dorito chips bag? Was it hooked up to a screen inside of the tent?
Yeah, so that was actually something we had tried a technique recommended to us by Doug Hychek, who's one of my favorite researchers, just awesome guy. Love to consult with him about these kinds of trips. Just, what's something we maybe try to push the envelope with? And he said, try this. Try setting up a system of like either dash cams or home security camera system around your camp and tent. So if you get anything in the 360 that walks by or moves by, you'll get it. So one of the disguise techniques he said was, put it in things that look normal. Put it in a bag of chips. So, easy enough with three hungry dudes on a long drive up in the wilderness, kill a couple bags of Doritos. So we stuffed cameras in there. I believe they were Anki home security system that we got. Really cool. We hooked it up to a monitor. We had that in the tent and kind of cover it up. So even if you're standing outside, you wouldn't really see the light of the monitor, but it allows us to basically monitor all night. Now the cameras do give off IR. So, I don't know how effective that was, but we did get footage of something walking in back of camp. I think it was most likely a moose, but there was a swamp behind our camp in Maine. This is where we tried this out. Our second episode of Beyond the Trail of, we were up in the wilderness of northern Maine, which I think is one of the most underrated bigfooting spots in the country. And it's just like, it's a real needle in a haystack. It's a one needle in 10 haystacks, because you've got 3.5 million acres of the most uninhabited territory anywhere east of the Rockies there in northern Maine. It's a perfect habitat. I mean, so much moose evidence, you're practically tripping over moose scat and prints and bones, all kinds of stuff. So that area supports huge animals as is. So why not Sasquatch? If you've got 70,000 moose or 30,000 black bear, I'm sure there's a few Sasquatch in there, as the reports seem to indicate. So we had something basically walk in this swamp behind camp. You just see this huge object move. And if you watch it, I think if you watch it on an iPad or a phone, it for some reason the pixelation looks a little better because it's a little bit more compressed. You can see what looks like the hind legs of the moose as it moves. It's kind of very pixelated because it was far away, but whatever it is, it's in the size range of a moose. So that's most likely what it was. But when I first saw it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we looking at here? Is this possibly what I think it is? And you have to kind of stop yourself and say, well, is it too good to be true? And then we start analyzing it and determine it was most probably a moose. But it's really interesting. So the system worked. It captured something large going through the area that none of us had any idea about. We were probably sleeping when that happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I'd ask, have you ever encountered any orbs?
Yeah. Not so much, I guess, orbs. We saw one in Pennsylvania that was kind of moving through the trees. I'm not really sure what that was. I've seen what I would describe as UFOs. If I use the definition, unidentified flying object, I can't say what they were, but even in Northern California now, we saw some kind of thing moving through the sky that I could describe as an orb, that wasn't a satellite or a plane, moving in very weird patterns, bobbing, and filmed a little bit of that. It was definitely interesting. But yeah, I've heard from other researchers as well, the orbs going around in the woods, and I don't know exactly what that might be, but as I said, UFOs, we saw the craziest UFO I saw was in Pennsylvania, in this area I researched with some friends of mine that are more into the UFO side. It was kind of this like flap area where they describe Bigfoot sightings as well as other strange things going on, unmarked black helicopters. I mean, Pennsylvania has a lot of those weird stories, whether it's Chestnut Ridge or this area. This is an area that Eric Altman and Sean Forker and others have researched and had weird stuff happen in, Bigfoot related and otherwise. So super interesting. But, I was mostly interested in the Bigfoot stuff. And we had this like, it looked like a cloud that had a light inside of it kind of moving through the sky in slow motion. And we saw smaller, brighter lights fly inside of it or outside of it and back into it. And we watched that and we filmed that actually on night vision. I have the whole video on my website. So if were those orbs flying out of it, I don't know. I mean, it was the strangest thing I've ever seen out there. And it kind of got me a little more interested in the UFO topic, which is obviously even more popular, I'd say, than the Sasquatch topic globally with everything going on now. I mean, it's like UFOs in the news every other day. So it's super interesting. I don't know what's going on. I mean, maybe that could have been some secret government technology we're not privy to. That's possible. it was weird. You know, I fly drones. I've grown up flying. My grandfather flew jumbo jets. I've been around planes, and I've seen a lot of weird weather and atmospheric things that otherwise might be mistaken for UFOs, but this wasn't like any of that. This was something unique.
Let's see. We're getting some questions coming in. Daryl Denton asked, what are your thoughts on Dogman?
Pretty creepy. Don't want to run into one. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because I like a lot of the folkloric stuff. I tend to look at maybe the Dogman a little bit more like I would look at vampire stories or the traditional werewolf. Having been down to Louisiana and looking into the Rougarou, we did a film about that on this show called Chasing Legends I was working on. That was really interesting. You know, it was a very culturally connected story. I mean, it's basically a swamp werewolf, and it talks about, it manifests on people. And, you know, there's a little bit of religious motif with it. You know, you use 13 pennies, and it can happen if you're not baptized, and a lot of different kind of connotations like that. But when it comes to the other Dogman stuff, I don't know. I mean, I look at the Beast of Bray Road, the possible occult connections, all the other weird stuff going on. There seems to be, you know, a lot of Dogman sightings across the country. I don't know what that exactly is. I tend not to think that there's probably not a biological unidentified giant canine species running around. I don't really necessarily believe that myself. Haven't really seen anything that leads to that. But if you look in a little bit more of the weirder side, I don't think we understand everything that's truly out there. So something's going on. I don't know what it is, and I know that's a bit of a cop-out, but I really haven't looked into the Dogman topic as much. And like I said, the Rougarou is probably the most in-depth look at you know, modern werewolf sort of story I've looked into. And you know, plenty of people would tell me, oh, it's just a Bigfoot, that people were interpreting as being a werewolf, because at the time that's what the Cajun people thought, or other people say, you know, it was just a devil dog kind of thing. So yeah. I don't know.
Well, you know, if y'all do a Beyond the Trail ever on the Beast of LBL,
between the lakes,
yeah, that's our home research area, so we could actually take you to the spot if
heck yeah,
if y'all wanted.
That would be awesome. Yeah, because we're definitely hoping to, at some point, you know, right now Beyond the Trail is basically Bigfoot related, but we will probably branch in other cryptids as well. I'd love to go back to Lake Champlain, do more on that, do others as well. I mean, there's so many good ones out there, and Land Beyond the Lakes, I think, is a fantastic story, something that I would definitely be really interested in looking a little more into.
Okay, Anna, we thank you for putting your question back up there again. She asked earlier, I asked if you have ever used any frequency reading device in the field.
So not personally, but I've been with folks that have used, you know, kind of EMF stuff, Geiger counter as well. At one point, you know, looking into areas in Ohio that had possible radioactive stuff, Point Pleasant in that area, and seeing if you get anything, you know, the stories of all the radioactive waste that was possibly there, obviously munitions and things that were at the TNT area in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, way back in the day. So not personally, that's not really something I've looked into. I'm not as big into the EMF kind of stuff. I know people that are, and if I was to need something like that, I'd probably go to them instead of really trying it on my own and not really knowing what I'm doing, or at least trying to get advice from people a little bit more in tune with the frequencies. And, you know, we've been out in some of these areas, like in Pennsylvania, the same area where I saw this UFO. There's been a long, you know, legacy, I guess, of Bigfoot sightings in that area. And a few years ago when we were out there, one of my colleagues, Paulino, he had one of these EMF kind of detection devices and had some stuff going on. So, yeah, I just don't know a whole lot about it.
Mark Nebel does. He went to Land Between the Lakes to the Beast LBL kill site with one.
Well, really what we do is post, you know, after the audio is recorded, to where, you know, we look at it on the spectrogram and compare it to different animal frequencies and that sort of thing. But Daisy Dukes asked, how close have you been to a Bigfoot?
It's a good question. Consciously, I suppose within a few hundred feet, maybe 500 to 1,000 feet. If, whatever was producing knocks when we were in Bluff Creek was in the general area, of where the knocks were, that would probably be, within a few thousand feet, I would guess at the most, or in Ohio as well. When I've been out there, I was out there with the late Dallas and Wayne. I think Wayne's still alive, but those guys are interesting. And we had some stuff going on. Wayne did this crazy Bigfoot call in this boneyard area where they dump dead cows. And, as soon as we started going up to the woodline, we started getting these really loud knocks, and I have them on audio. And it was like, oh, that was the first time I'd really heard great knocks audibly. And I was like, oh man, that's creepy. And that was just in the tree line. So I think, based on the recordings I have of when we were camping in 2019, and we've tried to replicate a little bit, having the audio recorder where our tent would have been. And basically this area we were camped, it's like a clearing. So there's woods all around. So we had the audio there, and we would kind of walk around and do some knocks. It was within, 50 to 100 feet. But again, I wasn't conscious. So I was sleeping. So I wasn't really aware of what was going on. And I would venture to guess a lot of people that are researching probably have been a lot closer to a Sasquatch than they realize because of these things and how silent and camouflaged. I mean, one of the stories that I'm really interested here in New Hampshire is called the story of the Wood Devils up in northern New Hampshire. It's an old logging story from the 1800s, and it was described as these tall, hairy creatures that were covered with gray hair that you could almost walk into one before seeing it. That because they would just stand against the trees, and they would let out these piercing screams at night. So that was the older description. This is pre-1950s Bigfoot. So, it's got a lot of the regional stuff. So, I think these things are probably a lot more camouflaged. I've heard reports. A friend of mine basically almost walked into one, and it kind of sat up and freaked him the heck out before he got out of there.
Okay. Papa Craig asked, do you go to the Blue Mountains in Oregon? Have you ever been to the Blue Mountains?
Unfortunately, not yet. I would love to. Oregon's one of those places that almost everywhere you go is good Bigfooting grounds, except for parts of Eastern Oregon. The Blue Mountains are in Eastern Oregon, actually. It's kind of that eastern, southeastern, or northeastern Oregon, southeastern Washington. That's obviously, I think, where Freeman was in the Blue Mountains. I haven't made it out there yet, but when we drove up, we basically drove up from Northern California, Bluff Creek area, straight to Crater Lake, and you have the Umpqua National Forest, amazing area, like reports in that area, that green belt that basically runs from the coastal Oregon to central Oregon, all the way up to Portland and then into Washington, the Cascades on one side, and you have the coastal temperate rainforest on the other. There's just reports everywhere. So Oregon's one of those places you go, it's almost difficult to figure out where to go because anywhere could be good. So the Blue Mountains were a little bit further out of our reach. Hopefully someday we'll make it out there, though.
Let's see. I've got another one. Let me find it.
You talked about pheromone chips earlier.
Man, those are gross.
Did you have any luck with that at all?
Possibly. I mean, I'm not sure. We had in Bluff Creek when we first got there, and I don't want to spoil too much of the story because it's going to be an episode, but we had this very weird rock slide incident that seemed almost too coincidental, the timing, to be just a natural rock slide. And we actually deployed a pheromone chip right near that area. So we had a trail camera up in that area too, because there was a game trail. I wanted to see if I could get a mountain lion. Didn't get anything, but we pretty much have deployed the pheromone chip in most of the areas we did research in. A lot of the times the problem is when you're on these trips, it's like you're just so tired. So when you get in bed at night, you're trying to stay awake to listen to see if anything's coming in. And then you just pass out and you wake up and the sun's baking you in your tent and you're like, oh man. So then it's a lot of audio reviewing. So possibly, I mean, I'm still in the process of reviewing that audio. Haven't found anything yet interesting, but we did like 2 weeks in a row. So there's just so much night audio to go through, but I can't say if we had any success with the pheromone chips or not. Some people certainly have. And I think they're nasty. They smell really bad. I had to put the jar of the pheromone chips into another jar and then into 2 plastic bags for my suitcase so it didn't stink up the suitcase, because that's the last thing I want is to smell like Sasquatch pheromones, especially if you know what they're made of. It's not something you want to smell like.
Okay, Joseph Johnston asked, what do you think the little people are?
It's a good question. I have a good friend of mine, Carrick St. Laurent of Crash Course Cryptozoology. He's been working on projects about the Pukwudgie. So in New England, there's a long history of little people story, and they're not even that hairy humanoid kind of little people. It's more of they're mischievous. They carry spears sometimes around. I don't know. I mean, the Native Americans all seem to have talked about the big people and the little people. Whether or not that's maybe folkloric, I don't know. I think in some instances it's probably just a folklore story, but others, maybe there is something out there. Something like the orang pendek you could describe as a little person. And I think that's a legitimate creature that is some kind of offshoot of maybe Homo floresiensis or one of these other little kind of smaller in stature primates that is bipedal and lives in that part of Sumatra where the sightings come out of. So it's a good question. I don't know. I think, you hear the Menahunes stories in Hawaii a lot, and it's universal. Europe, you have fairies and little kind of people, gnomes, all that kind of stuff. So maybe these stories all originated from things that people encountered back in the day. I don't know if they're still as widespread as they are. Say with Bigfoot, it seems to be a little bit more widespread. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Have you ever done any searching in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee?
Not searching, no. That's high on my list too. But I have been to the Smoky Mountains. We did a section hike down there along the Appalachian Trail back when I was in high school, I believe, and we did 2 weeks out there. Pretty rough area on the Tennessee-North Carolina border, and it was in I want to say mid-November. First day we get on the trail, already starts snowing. We had snow basically all 2 weeks, but then we'd come down to a lower elevation and we would do fire watch. There was about 12 of us in a group, and we would do 2 lean-tos and a fire in the middle so everyone could stay nice and warm. And it was a really interesting trip because it was all homemade gear. We had to make our own packs out of baskets, woven baskets, and we had to make these capotes, and really no modern technology. We had all our food and everything packed up. We spent much of the course of a semester creating our own snacks as well, whether it be beef jerky or preparing animal lard, pemmican, acorn flour, all kinds of stuff, our own beef jerky, or not beef jerky, trail mix, that kind of stuff. So I haven't done any searching down there, but from that experience while hiking, we were out there. I remember one night we would do these fire watches where 2 people would be up on shifts, keeping the fire warm. So everyone else, while they're resting, they can stay up. So we would do a 2-hour shift. So it'd be usually you and your buddy or something. And you're spending the time talking about whatever. But once we got to lower elevations out of the snow, there was a lot of leaf litter. And it's very similar to up here in New England. When the fall comes in, all the leaves are down, something's running around, you can hear it. Down from beneath this hill we were in, we just heard this massive thing just start running. You could hear, something crashing and moving around. And my friend and I at the time, we're grabbing our Bowie knives like, oh, this thing better not try to come into camp. But I wasn't necessarily thinking Bigfoot. I mean, I can't say, obviously, could have very well been a bear. I mean, it was still warm enough down at that lower elevation that there could have been bears up. And we did find bear tracks in the snow. That was an early year for snow even down there. I mean, some of the higher peaks, yeah, they get it snow pretty often, but in November. So yeah, Smoky Mountains, I would love to get down there and do more squatching now. And I'm sure we'll get there at some point. That's the thing, is there's so many good places. Yeah, you have your own stuff at home, and then you go to all these other places, and it's, even going to Oregon for a week or Bluff Creek, it's like a little taste. It's like, yeah, I could live here for 3 months, and then I got to go back to my place.
Yeah.
Okay, Daisy Dukes asks, do you think perfume causes Bigfoot to come?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, when we're talking about pheromone, that's obviously a very specific fragrance, very specific kind of goal in trying to attract something arousing. I don't know. I mean, maybe I think perfume repels other animals. If you're out there wearing a ton of cologne, your scent is already getting out there as a human, but that's gonna amplify it. It's definitely gonna say, well, this is not something that belongs in the woods. If you spend a few weeks in the woods, you get your own perfume that's not designer, it's not something that a lot of people tend to prefer, but you get used to that musk. I tend to think that works probably a little bit better for Just if you're out in the woods, just embrace the smell. A lot of people talking about, oh, when you're out there, just go rub yourself in leaves, kind of rub yourself in dirt, get rid of some of those odors. I've used a lot of the hunting scent off sprays before. I usually kind of spray some of the trail camera with that when I'm putting it out there, just so it doesn't freak stuff out. But I don't know. That's a really good question about the perfume. Maybe. I mean, I seems like women have good experiences with Sasquatch in terms of an attraction or being, having a woman present seems to bring stuff in, probably more so than, 5 dudes stinking being in the woods for a week.
Yeah, definitely.
You never know. I don't know. I mean, I think these things are so curious as it is. There's so many complex factors that might be in arousing, but maybe we'll try that sometime. We'll just take a whole bottle of cologne and start spraying it up, or perfume, and just sit there and see if anything's interested.
Yeah. We kind of think that if you're entering into an area where they're at, it's just like somebody coming in your front yard. Somebody is there,
right.
and we feel like ourselves that they're curious.
Oh, totally.
And so we feel like that, they're going to come around and watch us. And so we really try to use that to our advantage. And when we go out, we try to go into the hollers and give them the advantage of the ridges and stuff like that, to where they feel safer to come on in.
Absolutely.
John Hall asked, what kind of lighting do you use for night hiking? Is it better than flashlights?
I use headlamps. I have like a black diamond headlamp. A lot of the gear I use is kind of from my backpacking days and hiking. Up here in New Hampshire, we got the New Hampshire 48 4,000 footers. So there's over 48 mountains that are above 4,000 feet. So it's kind of a whole list. So a lot of the times we would do sunrise hikes. You're starting to hike at 3 a.m, so you can get up to the mountain right 7 a.m. when the sun's coming up. I just use, generally if I'm doing like an intense night hike, I want to have some good lighting. So a good quality headlamp is a necessity.
Yeah.
I want to have my hands free, especially if I'm in a dangerous area. The last thing you want to do is be holding a light and then slip and break something in a remote area. That's not fun. Whether you're hiking or squatching, whatever, a good headlamp works for me, black diamond. But if we're just sitting around camp with fire, without a fire, I typically don't have the light on unless I absolutely need it. Just kind of go with the flow. But a lot of people suggest red lights or other light colors. Yeah, maybe have a headlight that has some other capabilities. I've done that too. I mean, I don't know. I don't really get caught up on the kind of the light stuff. I just sort of, if I'm trying to sit and listen and be in the dark, I'm not going to really do much lighting.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing something physically engaging, I want to have a good solid headlight that will give me the ability to see what I'm doing and not break a foot or something.
Pappy is talking in the chat about 500,000 acres on fire in Southwest Oregon right now.
Oh my God.
And that's where he's located at, in that area. But
it's terrible.
It is. It makes me think about, I wonder, even though it's a terrible thing, could we use that to our advantage with animals fleeing the area of where a forest fire is going on, and maybe trying to intersect a Sasquatch? I don't know, it just popped in my head.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's obviously horrible to hear. When we were driving through Southwest Oregon from Northern California, we went up to Crater Lake, and we were in the I never know how to pronounce it, the Umpqua National Forest. But we camped basically on a logging road, middle of nowhere, super hazy. There had just been a fire. They'd actually shut down this whole part of the road. And while we were out there in Northern California, we met with Kip Morrill, who works with the federal government, coordinates a lot of the firefighter. He's a wildlands firefighter. So it's, you hear some of those stories and how important it is to listen and not do fires in some of these areas when there's critical stuff going on. But yeah, we were camped almost to where the road the road trying to get out to, so as we were heading up to Portland, was closed, and then they reopened it, but it was hazy air quality. We were almost choking on it. I mean, I'm just not used to that. We don't deal with forest fires nearly as much up here in the Northeast. It's a lot wetter in the summer season. I know even in Bluff Creek, there have been fires not that far from Willow Creek a few years ago, and Happy Camp, that area had been pretty burned out. And I know some of the Bluff Creek guys and people like Tate Hieronymus were saying, well, this might come to our advantage because maybe the Sasquatch have moved from that area with the other resources. Also, the Mount Hood area, there was an area that had been shut down last year. So we actually had to take a bunch of back roads getting into certain areas because the main road was taken out and is basically closed until next summer. So as Connor Anderson and Cliff were kind of talking about, they think that maybe the fires have pushed them into other areas. And that's why you have reports coming out of different spots, just kind of moving with the resources. I mean, we found this one meadow, beautiful meadow by this little alpine lake there in the Mount Hood area. We scoured the entire field for tracks. If there was anything, perfect spot it would have been, but it's never the case that you get perfect mud and then perfect print. But we found tons of elk, tons of deer. So if the animals are moving out of those areas, the Sasquatch are probably following them. So I totally think, especially out west, researchers should look into that, and I'm sure they do. I mean, they know their areas, so definitely, and just be careful because it's no joke out there.
Okay, this is probably a good question with you being up in the Northeast, and the question is, how do you deal with mosquitoes? Or down here we say skeeters.
They love me. I'm always the target around here. It was northern Maine is probably the worst ever. I mean, you have just, not only is it mosquitoes, it's black flies and gnats. They're just so bad up there. When we filmed Beyond the Trail, you'll see in the episode, I pretty much have a bug net on the entire time. That's the only way to semi-enjoy it. If it weren't for the bugs, that would be way more enjoyable. But there are pests constantly. You're going to get welts and bite marks everywhere. I use DEET. I've used permethrin. I actually use a lot to spray up just my gear in general because we have a lot of ticks, out east, which is really nice. Going out west, like almost nothing tick-wise. That's what I love about being out there. Out here, I run into the woods and I have to do a full body tick check, basically, even with spraying your gear with permethrin and using deep off woods and stuff like that. That generally seems to work for me. And I'm usually a target. Like when I'm in a group of people, the mosquitoes are always coming after me. I don't know. They just like my blood for some reason. So I try not to give it to them as much as I can, but it's not fun dealing with bugs. That's probably one of the worst things about the field in general is bugs.
Okay. BF Bud ask, what's your advice, suggestions for someone just starting looking for them?
I would say maybe pick an area that you might think would be viable to support other animals. What other flora and fauna is in the area? Is it pretty secluded? What's the kind of like I said, wildlife in the area? Do some research. Just read about the subject. Read John Vinternagel's stuff. Read Meldrum. Just read as much as you can. If you live in a state that has a book that's been written about the particular area, read that person's book. Like, I just got the book Oregon Bigfoot Highway, and I'm not from Oregon. I don't spend a lot of time out there, but reading that book is really interesting. Whereas if you're in another area, pick up a book by somebody in your state that's maybe written about Sasquatch in that area, regional adaptations, that kind of stuff. I would say go out there. Don't get frustrated if nothing happens, because that's most of the time nothing does happen. But those times you do get something happening, that's the stuff you tell when you're hanging out with other people. And then people think, oh, you have all these encounters happening. It's like, well, this is a very small sliver of what actually goes on. But I'd say the biggest thing is get out there and enjoy the woods. Find an area that's probably one of the biggest factors is if you want to do this all the time, an area that's close and accessible to you. So within like an hour's drive, that's something that you can do maybe weekly, every weekend, or even if it's close enough, if you're blessed to have an area that's within 25, 30 minutes, I mean, that's perfect right there. Maybe you have stuff going on your property. I don't know. That's obviously that's a pretty great scenario. Depends on who you ask. Some people aren't fans of when that stuff happens, but just find an area, learn about it, learn about the history. Has there been logging in the area? Was it previously deforested? What other animals might be in the area? Look for the signs of other animals. And just it's figure out if there have been sightings in that area too, and whether or not the area could sustain other wild animals and possibly Sasquatch.
That's great advice. And I would like to add that the BFRO has a great database, and
Totally.
you can always check the databases for any reports that might be close to you.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, people love to rag on the BFRO all the time. And, there's plenty of researchers within the BFRO, lots of great folks. I mean, I know plenty of them, and they've done their due diligence. I mean, they have those reports. That they're not the end all be all, though, when it comes to reports. There are other sites that have databases, or other local researchers. I mean, I have probably about 2 or 3 dozen, at this point, almost 4 dozen reports from New Hampshire that are not on any online database, that are just people tell me it at events, or people will tell me their story and they don't really want it out there. They just, they'll give you the story with anonymity. But the BFRO stuff, I know friends that have looked on there and found reports that have happened in the general area, and then have had things happen, and then other reports crop up as a result once they start kind of looking into it. Because maybe 1 out of 10 people report it to the BFRO, whereas other people in an area, especially if you're in an area like New England where there's not really a culture around Sasquatch, people are a little more reserved. So it may take some digging, but use the databases for sure.
Well, I cannot believe how fast this show has gone by. Larry, I'd like to give you this opportunity if you have a question to ask.
What have you got coming up over the next year? What projects are you going to be working on?
Oh, we got a lot going on. So, so as of now, Beyond the Trail is kind of the biggest kind of video undertaking. I still do stuff on my YouTube channel, Sasquatch Out of the Shadows. So that's do a Monday night weekly live stream at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're actually going to be doing a recap of this whole Pacific Northwest trip this coming Monday with a bunch of the folks that were on the project. So that'll be a lot of fun. And talk to other researchers. I try to do a lot of stuff in the New England area, just kind of put that a little bit more on the map and make it so people can start sharing their reports with a little bit less stigma. But Beyond the Trail like I said, we had Oregon. So we have a California episode coming up in August, Oregon in September. We're actually going to be heading out to Colorado and Utah pretty soon here too, to film some stuff out there. So I'm super excited for that, because I love Colorado and Utah. I think those areas are great for Sasquatch, because unlike the Pacific Northwest, or even in parts of the East Coast where you have so much territory out there, there's a lot of forest, but there tends to be in patches. So there's more congested areas where these things are. So really excited for that. And then we'll be doing something in Ohio as well with Seth and them, kind of regarding the McNerva monster case. It's a kind of an in-depth look into that. There's ongoing activity. And that's what we have on our plate for now. I'm sure there's going to be plenty that comes up. In November, the Olympic project stuff will be coming out as well. So I'm sure there's a lot. I mean, there's events, there's all kinds of other stuff going on too. But that's in terms of the projects. We're really trying to use up this summer and get out there as much as we can.
Well, Alex, we really appreciate you coming on tonight. You have shared so much, and when we have guests of your caliber on, that's when I usually go back and rewatch the podcast with a notebook and a pen and write things down, because I'm a firm believer that we should be sharing information with one another. We hear so much about what happens on the East Coast, and the same things happening on the West Coast.
Right.
And I think that can really help us. But we would like to give you this opportunity to leave us with any final words.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you guys for having me on. And, there's really no experts in this field. I think there's just people who have been at it longer, who might have more of a better idea about where to look in certain areas. I'm certainly not one of those guys. I haven't been doing this for that long. I'm just a dude who likes to have fun out in the woods. I enjoy nature more than anything, and getting out there is a lot of fun. And I'm just lucky to be able to go to a lot of these different places. And I hope that some of my videos can inspire people to get out there and do the same thing. And just at the end of the day, even if you're not going to Sasquatch research, just get out and enjoy wilderness, enjoy the wilderness, enjoy the woods, leave no trace. I can't tell you the amount of times I go out there and I see these campsites and places in the woods, and I'll see toilet paper sticking out of the ground and people littering, and it really makes me angry and sad, really. I mean, people just learn to respect the wilderness. We want to make sure it's there. But like I said, I'm just a dude who likes to go out there and have fun with his friends and look for Sasquatch. And hopefully in some of the videos, we can take you along for the journey, people that might not be able to go, and hopefully it'll inspire others to go. So that's basically all I have to say. Thanks for listening, letting me ramble, guys. And hopefully people enjoy the video stuff, because we do it for the fans. We don't really do it we do it for ourselves, of course. But like I said, I think a lot of it is what we would want to see that you don't see from a lot of the reality TV programming and stuff that is kind of peddled in the mainstream.
Well, that's what great closing statement. Larry, do you have any final thoughts?
I told you it'd be a great guest. The one thing I like about Alex is he's not one of those documentary people that just researches the stories, the encounters, and goes to town and sets up and lets the people tell. He gets out there and documents the area, the wilderness, the activity, the non-activity, whatever. He shows you what's going on. And that's what I like. And he's honest. He'll tell you if he knows something or if he don't know anything. Too many people nowadays try to answer too many questions and they don't really know the answers. That's why I keep my mouth shut most of the time, because I don't know any of the answers. But
sometimes the best answer is I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely. But we do appreciate you coming on, Alex, and it's been great. I've enjoyed listening to your stories and your encounters and your experience.
Well, we want everybody that tomorrow morning after this podcast is processed, I'm going to pin it to the top, Alex's website, to where you can go and look at the videos that he's done, the documentaries, and because it's fantastic. The different cryptids that he covers, the UFOs and things of this nature. You're such a good filmmaker. And so it's going to be pinned at the top of the comment section. So y'all go there and click on it, subscribe to his YouTube channel. And we want to thank everybody in the chat room for great questions tonight. And we will see y'all again. Same bat time, same bat channel. Night, night, footers. Beast TV would like to welcome all of our new Facebook members. Be sure to check out our pictures and videos of possible evidence. And if you haven't checked out the Files tab, there is a wealth of information that you may find beneficial. If you would like to support Beast TV, check out our gear. We have coffee mugs, face masks, gaiters, shirts, and tank tops. The link is pinned at the top of the comment section. Everything is always marked down 20%. So come check out our junk.
This has been a Sawdust production.